Up next, we will hear from Barbara Minsker.
Hi, I'm Barbara Minsker, and I'm PI on the Clowder use case of the NSF CSSI Clowder project. And the focus of our use case is on the equity of urban neighborhood infrastructure. And this is the work that was done by my PhD student, Zhang Li, and with a lot of help from his committee members. So the focus of our work is on a research question about whether infrastructure deserts exist, which are low-income areas with significantly greater risk of highly deficient infrastructure relative to most other areas. And these would be areas as shown in this slide, maybe where the sidewalks are really bad, there's no access to different kinds of parks or trails or food or hospitals or poor internet connection. So in order to look at this, our research goal is to develop an equity assessment framework that considers multiple infrastructure types that would happen at the neighborhood scale, the smaller types of infrastructure. And this has never been done to look at more than one type of infrastructure. That framework does an assessment of the condition, takes a look at whether it's equitable from high income to low income, uses some statistical modeling to do that. And we use Clowder in two different ways. The first is to store all these diverse types of data that we collect to do these analyses, as well as the data that's generated. And then Clowder will be used to create extractors that will allow other cities to take these analyses and look at their own infrastructure and see if they also have equity problems. And that part is still to come. The methodology basically looks at each component of infrastructure, starting out at the street level, say with sidewalks. We would look at what percentage of the sidewalks are substandard, meaning that they either don't exist or they aren't passable, ADA compliant. And then we would give the neighborhood an overall assessment of 0 or 1 as to whether they exceed 50% of deficient infrastructure. Our case study is looking at Dallas, Texas, and this is the list of different infrastructure types and the data sources. Much of it is publicly available data, but some of it we've gleaned from machine learning using, for example, crosswalks to look at aerial images and identify the crosswalks in a more automated way. And what we showed was that in Dallas, there is very significant infrastructure inequity. And so this graph shows you the percentage of census block groups by income and how much infrastructure deficiency, how many different types of infrastructure have a problem in that particular census block. And you can see that the low income areas, there's a gap and there is more infrastructure deficiency in these red neighborhoods than there is in the middle or high income areas. That's that infrastructure gap. And then we have a statistical model and we've got some confidence intervals that show us the predicted number of deficient infrastructure types and the relative risk of middle and high income neighborhoods versus low income neighborhoods. And we see that in the high income neighborhoods, compared to low income, they're up to 3.5 times more likely to have bad infrastructure, more than 8 types of infrastructure that are deficient in those low income areas than in the high income, and similar results with the middle income, but not as much. And then the last step of the project will be to use Clowder to look at infrastructure deserts in other cities. And I talked about this earlier, where we would be able to upload into Clowder for any city and assess the relative risk and identify infrastructure deserts in those areas as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Really appreciate that overview there.
And while we're waiting for that, I just want to give a quick shout out to Richard England and his team who made all this possible. And I didn't mention it in the presentation. So
thank you.
Thank you, and my pleasure.
Luigi, go ahead.
Hi, Barbara. Thank you for the great presentation. Quick question about the input data that you collected. It looked like it came from a lot of different sources. How difficult was it to collect? And would you be able to then eventually make it open data for other users to also work with, or are there strict requirements on some of it?
Yeah, that literally took years to collect all that data, and there's still much of it. The particular infrastructure types that we looked at were somewhat driven by what data we could get our hands on. There's some infrastructure types that I still want to look at. Most of the data comes from publicly available sources, and we're happy to share it, especially once my student's about to submit his first paper on the project. And at that point, you know, we can go public on that as part of the paper. The one data set that is not shareable is the one that you worked on from the city of Dallas, where we have about, I think it's about 5 terabytes worth of data from having, they have a contractor that drove every street in the city of Dallas and took images. And we had to sign a data agreement in order to be able to get that data. So one would have to go to the city of Dallas and get permission in order to use that data. And then I imagine through Clowder, we could give access to it if they got permission. There is the question of getting us transitioned into this new instance and how well we could share from one instance to another, because we don't yet have that capability. But you tell me it's coming, so hopefully soon.
Definitely. Thank you.